I had the pleasure of being a part of Dana's team call 2 days ago. It was such a great time, and I'll tell you, Dana, I got to be honest, I didn't know who you were before you came over to Lasting Mark, but I got introduced to your YouTube channel, and man, I've really just have enjoyed. Just watching the way that you communicate with people and your sales process, and I have learned a lot from you recently. I love how your teaching process really parallels what Life Insurance Academy teaches, and I am excited to have you and excited to dive into a few things today. So welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me on your team meeting. It is an honor for me to be here. I've just been overjoyed since joining Lasting Mark and the community and the culture that has been created here and what you guys are a part of is so unique. If you haven't had a lot of experiences outside of this, if this is the first place that you're at, I'm telling you right now, the grass is not greener. It's just painted with green spray paint. And and really, you have everything you need, right? You have the systems, you have the tools, you have the leads, the opportunity, the mentorship, just the pouring into you from mindset perspective. It doesn't get any better than this, right? And we are what we make of where we're at, and just feel very grateful to be on here, and whatever I can do to help pour into you today, that's what I'm here for. And so what kind of topics do you think, Mike, would be appropriate for us to discuss?
Yeah, well, here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to be thinking about some questions that you may have for Dana, and I want you to put them in the chat, and we will try to get to them as well. And I did send out one of your videos this morning. I asked a bunch of people to watch it before we jumped into it. But
Okay, which
really,
one?
the first part of this conversation, Dana, I just kind of want to get behind. I just want to understand the way that you think a little bit, and I want to get back into some of your history before we get into some of your sales process. But I know you started in telesales just over 20 years ago. But before you got involved in telesales, maybe just start out by telling us a little bit about who is Dana Nesen? Where'd you grow up? A little bit about your family life. Just what was Dana like in the early years?
Okay, well, Mike, even though we have a lot of synergy and similarities in our professional career, we also have a lot of similarities in our younger years. I also was not a good student. Definitely a classic C student. I always thought it was because I was the youngest in the class and maybe I just wasn't as mature as everybody else, but I just never did good with authority. Like, really always was looking for shortcuts. Um, I think part of it, my parents got divorced when I was 3. My mom worked 2 jobs. We lived in a small apartment. My sister and I shared a room, and there was like the living room, kitchen in the middle, and then my mom's room on the other side. We did not grow up with any sort of, money whatsoever. Almost all of my clothes, my entire wardrobe was from my cousin on my mom's side, who did have some money. And so, I mean, my favorite time of the year was going to my cousin's house and getting bags and bags of her hand-me-downs. So definitely did not grow up the way my kids are growing up, which I'm probably overcompensating to a fault, right? That's my own therapy. And even taking it one step further, I don't think I realized how much we did not have until I was able to reflect on it as an adult. Like, I remember walking into our apartment one day, and if you look to the right, there was the kitchen with like the linoleum floor and like the white fridge. And I remember looking at the floor and thinking, our floor is not black. Why is our floor black? And all of a sudden I looked at it, and now the floor is starting to move. Like, why is our floor black and why is it moving? And this all happened within seconds. And then I realized we had cockroaches completely infested in our kitchen. And I would turn around, and then they were like on the door and then on the ceiling. And we had to leave immediately, did not grab any of our stuff, had to stay in like couches and living rooms of our my mom's friends' houses. And I went to 3 different junior high schools in 3 years, never really fit in. I was one of the only white kids with blonde hair in my entire class in 6th and 7th grade. I was called Wonder Bread. Last to develop. I mean, like, I think it's interesting a lot of the perceptions people have on you before they understand where you've been. And part of that is probably what caused me to challenge authority and always want to do things my way. I remember I was in Girl Scouts and I would put on my Girl Scout uniform and I would go door to door in my apartment complex and I would ask for donations for a trip we were going to take. But really, I would just take the money and go to the candy store, so not a great kid, not a great student. I never did anything bad. I never was like a drinker. I never did drugs, but just always trying to test the waters, right? Always trying to figure out what I could get away with next. And I think that only took me so far until I got into college. I went to a two-year school first, a junior college first, and really did terrible. Really did awful. I had one professor that came up to me after class one day, and he actually asked me, "Do you know how to study? Has anybody ever sat you down and like taught you how to study?" And I said no. And so this one college professor in my 2-year university in San Diego, California, spent the rest of the semester with me, helping me learn how to be a good student so I could get through. He ended up being one of my mentors and got me into Cal State Northridge, the university, ended up studying kinesiology, got my degree, never use it. And then that just led into where I met my now husband. He's the one, his father introduced me to sales. And in 2004, I dropped out of my master's program and entered sales for the first time. There you go.
Oh man, what
That is me in a nutshell.
there are so many similarities there, some I mean some that are different too, but my father, who's on the call with us today too, was a pastor growing up. When I was growing up, well, when he was growing up too, he actually started at a really young age. And so, anything, if you know anything about bivocational pastors, they don't make a lot of money. I think I was in high school when he purchased his first home. So I had a lot of my clothes were hand-me-downs. Thankfully, we didn't have any of the roaches in the home, but I understand, being one of the only white kids in the neighborhood and in the school and struggling through school. At what point in your life did you have the thought, because I'm listening to your background and where you came from. Well, first of all, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in California?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I
Just
grew
you
up
and
in
your sister?
me and my sister.
One sibling? Okay. At what point in your life did you have the thought enter your head that maybe I don't have to live like this, like maybe my future could be different? And how did that come about?
It actually really, it wasn't something that I just focused on. I was more focused on just challenging the status quo rather than how I want to live. I didn't think about the future very much. It was just about doing things my way on my terms. And um, this is how I'm going to do it. And I don't care what anybody says kind of thought process. And I guess if I reflect again on that question that you asked, it wasn't until I met my husband, um, and I've said this on an interview before, where I was no longer able to get away with my crap anymore. Like he would call me out on it. And I was like, oh, this is new. I would try to get away with things at that sales job too. Was not happening. And so it really wasn't until like he put a mirror up to like, why are you trying to fight this? You know? And I care because I cared about him so much as we were dating. And I could see a future with him. And I saw what he had already built with his dad. And he has a I've been asked to interview him on my channel. So that may be coming in the future here. But he has a very interesting past, a very interesting story. And it really wasn't until like I cared about someone so much that I knew that if I wanted to keep this relationship, I had to change. And for me to change and want this future with this person, I had to do some like self-reflection. And it wasn't really about like what I wanted for my future. It was just about me personally. And ultimately that changed the trajectory of my future.
What do you think got you to that point of self-reflection? Like what was it? What and this can be a two-part question. So what do you think got you to that point? And what is it that drives you? Like what drives you to want to challenge the status quo, to want to be better, to want to do more?
So that's a two-part question. I think what drove me to change was that I did not like how it felt when I kept getting called out on what I was always trying to go against. It's like, I don't like the way this is making me feel. Why am I constantly trying to fight? Why don't I just, go along and see what happens? And that continued to get me better results than I was getting myself. And so the pattern of following a process, and this was with the job that I had with him, and doing things without fighting. I think probably I got to that point because I probably always had to just fight to get to through life up until that point. And so I just at that moment I was like, I don't have to fight anymore. I can just be, and it's gonna be okay. And so why I think I still, fight the status quo and now like I've definitely still have that inbred in me. I'm not the person that's just going to take a script that was handed down for me. I'm going to want to know, well, who wrote this in the first place? Where did this come from? Is this what works for everybody? I think that like critical thinking of just I don't want to do something just because someone tells me to do it. I want to understand why. That's just something that's just inbred in me and probably what helps keep me fighting for more.
I love that. I love that. I love that you said that your husband kind of calls you out. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's, and maybe you can even speak to the importance of having someone in your life to do that, to tell you, to be honest with you and tell you the truth, tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Right.
But other than your husband, and maybe you can speak to that for a second, and then also other than your husband, who are some key people that spoke into your life early on and that encouraged you and maybe did challenge you, maybe stretched your thinking? And what role did that play?
I really didn't have very many role models like that growing up. I had my grandmother on my dad's side that I was really close with, but she wasn't really someone who like challenged me. She was just someone that I was safe with, that I, just kind of felt like I called her every single day after school and I just talked to her about my day. So she was just like my safe place. And then I would say really nobody that I can even actually recall until that college professor just kind of like took time out of up until that point. It was, we're just going to pass her and push her forward. We're just going to pass her and push her forward. With the C's, like nobody really did challenge me or care enough to get me to do any of that reflection because I always just kept moving forward no matter what happened, just barely getting by. So really it was there in that moment. And then I would say the next person would be my husband. And there really hasn't been very many people in my life leading up to the professional part of my life that I would say have made a huge impact on me that I can recall.
What kind of role do you think that played, or what kind of effect do you think that had on you when he did start calling you out and telling you the truth on where things were, how things
Yeah,
were?
it was hard. It was really hard because that's when I had to decide, do I want to continue to stay this path and risk losing this relationship? Or, do I want to look in the mirror and change the direction that I was going to preserve what I knew was really great? It was a gift that had come to me. I mean, we went to therapy, and that was my first introduction into communication skills, was from the therapist. And I think that part of that, it was being in therapy we were in therapy for a couple of years. That was my first introduction to communication skills. And I immediately translated that into sales very early on in my career in sales.
I was one of the things that you had talked about when you were in your interview with Roger was that that's something that a lot of people lack, is very basic communication skills. And
Mhm.
I would definitely agree with you on that. How long have you been married?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. So we've been dating since 2004. We didn't get married till 2010. Um, a lot of that was because we had a lot of work to do, right? And a lot of the therapy was before we got married. We were like working out, how do we how do we communicate so that way we can have a healthy relationship? And um, talk about someone who made a huge difference in my life was our therapist. Her husband married us.
Wow.
Yeah. So that right there, like that whole experience that I had, played a huge role in my sales career. And I think helped me start becoming, planting some seeds in the type of leader that I would eventually try to become. And I'm still developing that skill every single day. But I think at the core of a good salesperson and at the core of being a good leader is how you communicate effectively, how you figure out what's going on with the person that you're speaking with, by not trying to convince them or persuade them on how you're looking at something, but really trying to understand their perspective on where they're coming from, and then maybe offering suggestions. And I practice this stuff all the time on my kids. I'm actually not the best at it with my husband, believe it or not. Because you always have that person that no matter what happens, they're going to stay. Like no matter what happens, he's staying. But that has definitely helped um, along the way through my growth. I mean, I don't even recognize the person that I was prior to 2004. It feels like a completely different lifetime and a completely different person.
Yeah, I can say the same thing about myself since 2011. I didn't have the experience you had in sales before insurance or in business, period, really. But thank Jesus, I'm not the same person I was 14 years ago when I started in this business. I shared with you the other day that I really think that this business, at least for me, has been a personal growth opportunity with a highly paid compensation package, attached to it. I've had to stay uncomfortable. I've had to fight. I've had to make the tough decisions, and no growth happens when you're comfortable. So you got involved in telesales in 2004. You were doing some merchant services.
Mhm.
Then after that, you got into realtor.com. You did that for about 7 years. Why telesales?
So go back to the merchant services job. Telesales just found me. That was the business that I was brought into. It was my husband and my father-in-law had started this company together, and they were sending out direct mail cards to people that filed DBAs to open up a business. And it was actually inbound calls. And the postcard would say a free cruise for two if you sign up for a merchant account. And we would make our money leasing the credit card machines, and the company made the money on the processing fees. And so it just was telesales. So my first ever experience in sales was over the phones. And I just happened to, I think, be really good out of the gate. I don't know why, but I got pretty lucky and was able to. And part of it, I think, because I did not understand sales, part of it was just my work ethic. Like I was so driven to be number one and I don't know where that came from, but I was so driven to be number one, probably because I'd always been that C student. And like, here I am, I get to kind of start all over. In 9 months, I had paid off my entire student loan debt. And I was at the point where I called my dad. I remember going out onto the balcony. We were like a boiler room setting, just rows and rows and rows of small little cubicles and fax machines that line the back of the wall because we had to fax our applications, get our clients to sign it and fax it back. And it was like a 16-page application that they had to sign and initial every single page on. And I remember going out to the balcony and calling my dad and letting him know that he didn't have to make my car payment for me anymore. And by the way, my very first car, I was 18 years old. I did not get a car when I was 16. I was 18 years old, and it was a $3,000 '89 Toyota Corolla that when I would go up the freeway, up the hill on a freeway, I would put my foot all the way down to the pedal, like as far as it would go, and it would barely go 45 miles an hour. Like it was like a Tonka toy. And a couple years later, I had wanted to get a lease on a car, like my first very brand new car, in like 2003, like a year before I met my now husband. And my dad said that he would help me make the payments. And so about a year later, I was able to call him and say, Dad, you don't have to make the payments for me anymore, because he didn't have a lot of money either. And so that was a pivotal moment for me when I knew that I could do this. And that's when I dropped out of school. And I said, sales is what I'm doing now for the rest of my life.
What kind of, just ballpark, I'm just curious, what kind of income were you making in those early years doing telesales?
I would probably say 8 to 10,000 a month.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
it was a
that's
lot.
really incredible.
It was a lot for 2004.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
we had actually were making so much money for us at that time. We weren't even married. And about a year after we met, we bought a house because everyone was like, you got to put this money somewhere, you got to invest. And so I was 25 years old. We had a house, we weren't married. And I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. But yeah, we kind of did things backwards, which I think is probably part of the problem why it took us so long to get married.
Mm. Well, I got a couple questions in the chat here. I'm going to come to them in just a
Okay.
minute, but I want to fast forward a little bit. So, you got started in insurance almost 5 years ago, end of 2020, so four and a
Mhm.
half years, give or take.
Yeah.
And you had said when in your interview with Roger that you issued 300,000. You told me that you submitted about 400,000 that very first year, issued 300,000 that very first year as an agent. What would you attribute that to?
Persistent consistency and determination that I wasn't going to fail. Um, I had shared with you, and I think I did on the interview with Roger, that my introduction to this industry was 6 month to 2 year old direct mail leads on phone burner. And I would
One at
go
a time, you
for
said, right? Just
one at a time, just calling through it, ringing, answering machine, next. And I would go for an hour and a half without anybody picking up the phone. Just, I maybe had a handful of pickups during the day. But because I had so much telesales experience coming into it, I knew as soon as that person answered the phone, I had to fight for that conversation like my life depended on it, because I knew I wasn't going to have a lot of opportunities. I had to create my opportunities with my activity. And so when that person said hello, that was it. I would play mind games with myself. Like, if I let this person off the phone, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. Like, it was that psycho for me. And so if I had 5 people pick up the phone in an entire day, I was presenting to 3 of them. My very first day, sorry, Mike, my very first day, I closed a sale.
you said you made like 600 dials, right? Isn't that what you said?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was nonstop with activity. And I treated it like a job because I had come from W-2. This was my very first 1099 experience ever. That I was at my desk at 8. I would actually start to get panic, a little bit of anxiety if it was 8:01 and I wasn't at my desk. So, my dad always had a saying that when you're early, you're on time. When you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, forget about it.
Be in the
So
military.
yes, he was military. So coming early was like my on time, 7:55. that starts getting closer to 8 o'clock, like I start feeling that. Even today, I still feel that way. So I get there at 8, and I do not get up unless I have to go to the bathroom. And I would even have, I used to take pictures of my beverage lineup. I'd have like a big thing of ice water. I'd have a couple sparkling waters, my coffee, and it would all just be there. And I would just, if I got hungry, I would literally run to the fridge, grab something, bring it to my desk, and I would keep dialing. Kind of like the boot camps, how they're run. That was just, and it was just me. There was nobody else. I had no mentor. I had a field sales script. I had nobody telling me what to do. I had no daily sales trainings or call reviews to go to, nothing. Here's a script. Here's some old leads. Let's see what you can do. That was it.
How were you able? I mean, I'm just thinking about that, and you know, I've dealt with such a lack of self-confidence growing up. I'm an introvert. I don't engage with people. I'm not the guy that's going to go meet you at the gas station. And so, first of all, 600 dials to get your first sale. That's a little different than what I'm talking about of making 5 or 6 dials and getting a presentation and getting your first sale. You still put in the effort
Yeah.
there. What is it like? Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people would not be. I mean, this business is hard mentally and emotionally, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. We talk all the time here about how failure happens in isolation. I mean, there is no greater isolation than you being by yourself with literally a phone script, a phone, and these 2.5-year-old, 2-year-old leads, the negativity that you're getting, that you're probably getting cussed out, you're getting hung up on. What is it that drove, like, how did you get through that, and how did you maintain that until you started seeing some steady success? What is it about you that kept you in the game?
So I think it's a two-part answer. Number one is my desire to succeed was greater than my fear of failure.
Mm,
I mean, it 1,000,000%. But number two, because I had, and this isn't going to be true for a lot of people that come into this business, I did not need to pay my bills yesterday. So I did not go into my calls in panic,
mm.
like I have to get this sale to pay my bills. And so when we train people
No
how
commission
to
breath.
remove themselves from the expectation of getting a sale, my mind was already there. I already knew I need to just be present on this call. How can I help this person? But yes, I need to get through the script. I've never done this before. So I was panicky, like my palms were sweating, my armpits were dripping, like my heart was racing. But still, it was not about I have to get the sale to pay my bills. And I think that pressure that I did not have probably did help me a little bit into just wanting to prove to myself that I could do this.
Well, I think that's critical, not having to have the pressure of making the sale so you can really focus on the person. I mean, that's a tough position when you come in here and you don't have any money and you've got bills to pay, you got a family to take care of, and you need to do that. But at the same time, you're trying to be an active listener and to do that. So, you're wired differently than most people. And so, congratulations for all your success up to this point. Fast forward a couple of years there, you had an incredible run here at another company, and by the end of your 4th year, you had 115 consistent agents. You said with 60 to 70 that were writing on a regular basis. At what
Mhm.
point did you decide to build an organization? And you issued about $5 million that year.
Mhm.
At what point did you decide to build an organization? And what do you think are some of the keys, the key steps that got you to that level of success 4 years into your journey?
So I decided that I wanted to build a team in my ninth month. So I actually issued 300,000 in 9 months, not 12 months, because I
It's
stopped selling
incredible.
the first 3 months of the year to coach and train and build. Um, and I just kind of instinctively knew that if I was going to be a good leader, coming from a Fortune 500 company that was a News Corp company, I came from a place of structure. I came from a place of we bring salespeople in. This is the training they go through. These are the meetings that we have. These are the systems that we use. This is how we, follow scripts and do. So I had a model of what I saw could work as far as like running a telesales team. So I knew I just needed to rip off and duplicate here because Adam, who was my partner, he'd only done field sales for 14 years prior. He had never done telesales. And so he was relying a lot on me to build it. He was funding it, but I was building everything from the ground up. So 9 months in, he started getting people that were like, what's Dana doing? How is she so successful in telesales? How can I do what she's doing? And people were starting to notice and reach out. And we were getting people that wanted to do telesales organically because of my personal success. And so we started getting a few people, and I was like, well, if I'm going to properly train them, I probably can't be on the phones all day selling myself. This was just my thought process. So at about 9, 10 months, I said, I'm done. I can't sell anymore. I'm going to focus on building this. And so again, but at that point, I knew and I was mentally okay that I was going to be taking a financial step backwards, which I did for probably 3 or 4 months. I went from making a good amount of money to making nothing again, right? Because I was just now starting to get a little bit of pay through,
Yeah.
but my agents weren't selling anything yet. So I went to nothing, cold turkey, to pour into the team and start to build systems and processes. In January of that year, I started the YouTube channel. Nobody knew who I was. I was begging my friends and family to follow me. And I just started putting out content to try to teach people how to do what I was doing. And that is how I started growing the team.
Well, that's incredible. Here, you and I had a similar situation just after that. Here you are having all the success, 115 agents running, you've got this growing team. Your company comes to you and says, "Hey, we're not doing telesales anymore. You can't do that. Your opportunity's over."
Yeah.
There's so many similarities between what you went through and what I went through. And I know some of the thoughts that went through my head, and I know the things that I wrestled with. um, what was it like? First of all, I love what you and Roger were talking about how important it is to how you handle these situations and never to burn a bridge. And that's
Mhm.
something I was taught very early on too, that even though we're in a large industry, it's small. And
It is.
once you've done something, most people know each other
Yeah.
when they've done something. Talk just a little bit about, and then we'll get to some of these questions in the chat, but talk just a little bit about that transition. And did you doubt that you would stay in the industry, and why did you stay in? And what was that transition like? Like how difficult has that been for you from the moment you got that phone call to making the decision that no, I'm going to go all in and go build this again?
Yeah, that was a crazy day, right? That's like one of those days that you never forget. I remember January 7th, it was like almost 5 o'clock. I remember where I was sitting. I remember like I just remember what the room looked like. Just one of those like memories that is just so embedded in your brain. Getting the call, Adam goes, "Are you sitting down?" I was like, "Oh God." Are you sitting down conversations? Yeah. And when he told me that it was done, it was over, I was like, "Well, how much time do we have to tell the team?" And he said yesterday. And I was like, "What?" I had just gotten back from a couple months prior. I had just taken my managers on a trip to Utah on this wellness retreat to celebrate them. We had all these big plans of how we were going to grow. 3 weeks prior to that, the company had just given me a Rolex for, the, the one of the earliest managers to ever earn a Rolex in the company's history. Like when I say I was blindsided, I mean, it was like you could have never paid me any amount of money to know that that was about to happen. And that the next day we just had said we're done. Um, And so there was definitely a moment where I was like, do I want to do this again? Do I want to stay in this business again? I definitely had those questions. Um, and uh, I think very, very quickly, not even within 24 hours, I was like, of course I'm going to stay in this business. This business has brought so much to me and to so many people that I've impacted, not just families that I've helped, but agents that I've trained, and how I've directly seen their lives change. And when you make that decision and that flip from just being an agent and selling life insurance to building an agency, like magic happens. And it just, the compounding growth, it just becomes something that you don't even control anymore. It just happens. And that's where the multiple six figures starts to hit you. And I was on pace that year, or this year, I was probably on pace to earn my first $1 million in my first, in 1 year. And knowing that that's possible on a program that we had free leads at a reduced commission, I was going on pace to earn $1 million on a program where I was earning 65% commission
Wow.
and a 5 to 10% override. If that was possible on that model, imagine what's possible on this model.
Mm.
But I also know it's going to take another long time to get back there. I mean, when I think about how long it's going to take, I have a 5-year plan minimum before I even think about the next 5 years. It's not 1 month. It's not, let me give it 90 days, not even 1 year. This is 5 years until we start seeing that avalanche of success. And that's where my mind was when I started it with Adam at Tailored Legacy. It wasn't, well, let me just dip my toe and see if it works. Because if that's your mentality, you've already quit.
Well, I've got no doubt that you'll be in the seven figures next year. I mean, congratulations on having a hell of a week. You know, you're number two right now in the company. You just started from zero in January, but you know what? You didn't start from zero. You started from experience.
Yeah,
And you know what I've learned is that some of our biggest heartbreaks, some of our biggest setbacks are really they're really the biggest blessings. And I know that I'm going to have a much stronger, more profitable business because I had my ladder to the wrong building, and now I can better appreciate what we have here. And the opportunity that we have, and we're going to get paid right, and we've got the right people, and we're able to build the right culture. And I see that happening inside of your organization too. You know, Faith had a question in here earlier, and she wanted to know, she said, what ways did you learn to become a better communicator apart from therapy? And I know that, and it's kind of and it's interesting that she asked that question because I know that you're also doing a book club right now, and I know that the book you're reading is about becoming a better communicator as well. And don't be shocked if I don't buy the book and jump in your book club, if that's okay.
I would
But
love it. I'd be honored.
how did you learn to become a better communicator?
Definitely, yeah. I know you said apart from therapy, but that definitely was my first introduction to having better conversations through asking better questions instead of listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond. Like saying that out loud doesn't sound as powerful as when you actually put it in practice. And so I was able to take a lot of those skills with me into sales. But my next, well, I guess before I say what I was going to say here, using those skills that I had and all the years of sales going into this, I had probably about a 30% conversion rate on my calls, in my first year in this business, just because of the experience that I brought into this business. But it really wasn't until I invested in myself into seventh level and NEPQ, and actually took for the very first time, invested in a formal sales training, and spent money to get better. I mean, we spent money on a therapist, but that was to save my relationship. This was to save my job. Um, It really wasn't until then when I then was able to, what was happening to me is I had a third, and mind you, I had a 30% conversion rate at one carrier, the most expensive carrier, with one product where everything's modified for the most part. You can't find level. It's either, it's either same day or 2-year waiting period. And I had a pretty good conversion rate. I was doing very well. I got rookie of the year in my first year, but I knew there were still people that were buyers that were not buying from me. And that pissed me off. Right. And I knew to my core, it wasn't because I didn't have access to 10 carriers. I knew that wasn't the answer. I knew it was because there was something I was missing or there's something I wasn't doing, right? It's all about looking in the mirror first instead of looking outwards at what I don't have. I never had grass is greener syndrome. It was always about maximizing what I have in front of me. So I invested in that formal sales training, and ironically, what I had purchased came with some one-on-one coaching and some script building. And that whole time in that week that I was slotted for me, I had COVID. And was running 103.5 fever every single day that I was in it, and I still showed up. And I did the script training. I was wearing my robe and had tea and tissues. And I was like, no, I'm doing this. When I recovered and I finished building my script overnight, because I had practiced it and was rehearsing it when I was sick. And overnight, when I got back on the phones, I was telling the team, because I had a team at this time, I said, okay, guys, I'm selling now for this week. I need to test this new script before I roll it out and teach you how to do it. Immediately, I went from a 30% conversion rate to a 70% conversion rate. There was
Wow.
nobody that was saying no to me unless they didn't have a form of payment or they just weren't buyers. Like if they were buyers, they were buying from me. And that's when I made a huge fundamental shift in really teaching a sales process, was finally investing in myself to become better and committing to that process. So here, this is why now you don't have to reach. You don't have to reach for the cheapest carrier. You don't have to have 20 different carriers to go to. It's not about the price. It's about having the right type of conversation with the person that you're on the phone with to get them to feel comfortable about changing. And then the price it's not about the price. It's about, yes, I'm ready to make this decision. And it's not about if, it's just about how much.
Man, we're not even going to really even have time to dive into your sales process. But one of the things that you had talked about is that, and you just said it, you said that to listen to understand, not to be understood. And you also talk about how education is key. And you said that the sales made an education.
Yeah.
For somebody that's brand new, that's just getting started, what would your advice be to somebody that's coming in, never done telesales before, maybe never worked commission? I mean, knowing the highs of the business and where you can get to, just with the success that you've had, what would be some key steps to a brand new agent to get a fast start and have a good profitable rest of this year and set themselves up for a strong year next year?
So the first thing, which is really, really hard, I think this is a really, really hard mental shift, but you have to be able to know that in your first 30 days, especially, you are paying your tuition. Even though you're buying leads, and even though you're learning a script and you're understanding this business, what you are investing is to learn. And that doesn't mean you dip your toe and you see if it works, because it's not going to work when you're brand new. So you still have to do the same activity. You still have to get a good amount of leads so that you can pay your dues and learn from your mistakes. And then bring those calls to Mike or come here to your training sessions with your team and you learn what you did wrong and you figure out how to get better. Like you have to learn that you may not get an ROI in your first 30 days, but what you are paying for is the opportunity to get better. right? I think that mental shift, we're so focused on, well, I bought this many leads and I didn't get any sales, so it must not work. No, that's not it at all, right? You have to buy the leads as part of what you are paying to learn this business. And you might not get a return in your first 30 days. And I tell my team, you got to go get a 0% interest credit card then. If you're dipping into your savings, that's because you need to pay those bills instead of buying leads. I did. When I lost my team, guess what? I went from earning a ton of money to earning zero again. I went out and got two $25,000 0% interest credit cards to fund my business because I'm not going to go into my savings, right? Or I mean, I can, but to run this business is separate from, your savings. You got to treat it like a business. So when you're brand new, if you can just get over that mental hump that you may not actually get an ROI in your first 30 days, but what you are paying for is that knowledge and that it just takes time to get better. But if you keep showing up every single day and you keep putting in that time and you keep making those dials and you continue to invest in yourself to get better, and you don't make the excuses to do something else when you know your butt should be in that chair, you absolutely will get better. I wouldn't stay in this business if I knew it wasn't possible to have an incredible career here. So that's what I always say to people in the first 30 days. You might not, right?
What
You
do
might
you think
not.
that should look like? Like as far as like what should the daily activity look like? What should the amount of leads or the financial investment look like? What part of like how long should they have their head down and commit to this before they should expect to see something like that whole mindset there with a brand new agent? What do you tell your agents when they're coming in that they should be able to expect?
Well, I tell them that you want to get 100 to 120 leads a week. So number one, because you need enough opportunity to have enough conversations. So 100 to 120 leads per week, non-negotiable for me. If you need to start a little bit smaller as you are learning it and making those mistakes, okay. But just know, I'm not going to stop saying you need to increase that budget until you get to that 100 to 120 leads per week. So that's for me and then we want to triple dial. That's what I say. We triple dial your leads in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And so that could be 500, 600 dials easy. I had someone, we post our daily goals in our group Slack. So I have everybody write how many dials they're going to make, what their goal is for pickups to conversations. That's an important metric to measure. Every time someone picks up that phone, are you fighting for that conversation? Because we don't get very many of them. So if you have 10 people pick up the phone, you better keep 5 of those. Your goal needs to be 50% pickup to conversation. So we put that in the chat as our goals, and then how many, presentations or how many sales we hope to, get from that. But if you're having 10 people pick up and 5 people you're presenting to, that should be 1 or 2 sales easy. But you have to give yourself the chance to get there by having enough leads, to make enough calls, to have enough pickups, to have enough opportunity to fight for that conversation, to have enough quotes to get a chance to get a sale. Because really, in order for us to feel that fire to show up the next day, we want to at least get a deal a day, right? But in order to get a deal a day, if we're at a 20% conversion rate because we're new, that's 5 presentations for 1 sale. Well, we need 10 people minimum to pick up the phone to get 5 opportunities to present to them. Well, in order to get 10 people to pick up the phone, how many dials do you have to make? So you have to reverse engineer it, and you have to control your day. You cannot let your day control you. So if you log in and you're like, well, I'm just going to see what happens today, and you have no plan, then that's you reacting to your day. And you have to reverse that and say, today, I am making this many dials, or today I am going until I get this many people answer the phone. And my goal is to get X percentage of those people to stay on the phone with me. Because statistically, if I can get this many people to stay on the phone with me, I can get 1 sale. You can predict your outcome if you mathematically know what to expect.
Amen. You got to track your numbers. You got to have a baseline. It's a skill set, and and you got to give yourself more opportunities to win, and the more activity you put in, the greater shot you have of making it. You also said in your conversation with Roger that the shorter that you're on the phone, the higher the likelihood that you're going to get a no, that you're going to need to think about it. So
Yeah,
be able to stretch out that conversation, get better at that. Yeah, I want to ask you one last question, and then if you have a few minutes, we'll do some rapid fire with some of the questions in the chat here.
of course.
But what is it that what are you fighting for? What is your purpose? What legacy do you want to leave? What is it that what is your purpose?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I'm working this hard to give my kids a better life than I had for myself when I was growing up. And I do struggle with that because I know that the life that I had as a kid helped build who I am today. And the easier my kids have it, maybe they won't have as much, grit and resilience and perseverance as maybe I do. Although my sister and I grew up in the same exact household in the same exact way, we couldn't be more opposite. So then I think, okay, well, maybe it isn't always about that. Maybe you just have to be in an environment where it's a combination of maybe a little privilege and a little bit of taught, skills and effort and hard work. So I think my kids, I mean, number one, I'm very motivated. They currently go to a private Christian school here in Southern California, and it's very expensive. And I want to make sure that we're always in a position to pay for that for them. But long term, I want to be able to build something that maybe my son can possibly come in and take over, right? And create like a business. Like, how cool is it that you can create a business that your family can step into and take over? I think that's so cool. So my goal has never been to build to sell, right? One of the reasons that I did not partner with a couple people that I was interviewing with is because their goal was to be the next FFL and sell to integrity for multiples. And I was like, that's just not my vision, right? So I want to grow something to where my family could come in and work their way through the business and ultimately, run it for me and have something for them and for their future thems.
I couldn't think of a better business to be able to do that. I get the pleasure of working with my dad. We got Charlie and Brianna on here, that they're brother and sister.
That's great.
You want to build something for that your kids can be a part of. We got Roger and Rose that work together, and he's had his daughters involved in it. And you got Brian's entire family involved in it. I mean, what better
Yeah.
business to get your family involved in when you're doing it for them? But man, I feel like we've really just scratched the surface. But let's just rapid fire through
But
a couple
don't
of
get
these
me
questions.
wrong, just to be completely transparent, and I want to get to your questions. There are days, many, many days, where I just want to be a stay-at-home mom and I don't want to show up, right? Like my plan was never to do this. By the way, my plan after we left that merchant services job, I got married, we had kids, and I was never going to go back to work for the rest of my life. That was not my plan. My plan was to be a stay-at-home mom, volunteer at school, make cookie cutter lunches, have dinner ready by 5. That was my plan. That's what I've always wanted. This was not what I've always wanted. So I do struggle with that still, right? My kids are 14 and 12 right now. I only have so many years with them left before they leave me, leave the coop. Who knows if they're going to be like you, Mike, and want to stay with me and do this job. But I still struggle with that daily with I wish I didn't have to be at my computer at 8. I wish I could just go take my kids to the beach, right? And so, it's hard to stay that focused. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, no, I completely agree. I mean, I've talked a little bit about a lot of the sacrifice that I've had to make in the time that I've had sacrifice with my family to do this. But that really is a perfect segue to the first question, because Brian wants to know, he said, how do you keep that drive long term in a way that's sustainable that doesn't create burnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think burnout is a metaphorical way of quitting. Like you say, I've just burned out. I think you've quit. Where I have been in a ball, crying in my closet, under my desk, just like I can't do it anymore. And I just let myself feel the feelings and get out of that, get the emotion out, and then come back at it from more of like a logical place. What do I want? Why am I doing this? And I have to re-ask myself those questions. And sometimes I write them down. Sometimes I get on the phone with someone. And then I have to kind of like re-talk myself into what is my purpose? Why am I here? What else would I do? Do I want what's easy? Or do I want to, what type of example do I want to set? Like why am, so I have to constantly re-ask myself those questions. And every time I do, the road always leads me back to here. Um, because one of the things that why I had to work at realtor.com, and I don't know if I shared this in Roger's interview or not, but two things happened to our family. Number one, my husband got really sick. We thought he had multiple sclerosis. He couldn't even lift my daughter up anymore. And he couldn't even get out of bed for days. He couldn't work. And at the same time, we had invested a ton of money into a business that went south. We lost $500,000 and my husband got sick. And I was
Wow.
like, I have to go back to work. And I bawled my eyes out for weeks. I did not want to go back to work, but I had to do what I had to do to survive. Right. And so going back into realtor.com for 7 years, saw tons of success there. And then now here, here I am thinking like, I could just go back and get a job. But is that what I really want? Do I really want to work for somebody else? Do I really just want to clock out at 5? Is that really going to give me purpose? Do I really want to ask for time off? Or do I want to control my destiny? Right? Because we have the ability to do that. My husband's not sick anymore. We're okay financially, but it's so much bigger than that.
I watched on a podcast recently, they said that, burnout was really, having a lack of purpose or lack of passion in what you're doing. And, so it relates there. But wow, what a story, Dana. What a story. And, I've seen so many people that have said that one, everyone sees the overnight success. They don't see the 20 years of struggle that go into it. But really, truly being able to be a success is to have it, lose it, and go build it again.
Yeah.
And really see what you're made from there. Vicky wants to know. She said, if you didn't have your husband helping make you better, how do you think things would be right now?
Have you ever seen the movie Sliding Doors?
No,
Anybody with Gwyneth Paltrow?
Bill
That
has.
movie, that is a great movie. The message is either Gwyneth Paltrow gets on the subway or she runs towards it, the doors close, and she misses the subway. And the movie is about how her life turns out, whether she gets on it or whether she doesn't. Either she comes home and finds her husband cheating on her, or she comes home and the woman leaves and they live in this blissful place. And what's interesting, if I can recall the end of the movie correctly, no matter which road she decides, she ultimately ends up in the same place. And so I often kind of I think about that too. My husband too, he was on track to go to the NFL, to be a quarterback. And he had so many series of setbacks that caused him to lose that opportunity. And he thinks, had this not happened, maybe I would have never met my wife. Maybe I would have never had my kids. And we talk about that type of stuff all the time. And even though we'll never know, where we would be, I think there's something about the way that life works that we always end up where we're supposed to be. And I think that I probably ultimately would have ended up in the same place.
You know what? I feel the same thing, and it's funny. It's you think you know where your life is gonna go, and you feel like you've made mistakes, or you feel like you should have made different decisions. But when I look back at my life, I mean, there's so many poor decisions that I've made, and so many things that I've gone through, and I say I would do things differently if I could do it again. But my experiences are who made me, or what made me who I am, and what's made me relatable, and what's given me that grit to be able to make it. Let's see here. Let's see if we can. I'm going to look through here and see what else I can pick out here. I'm not going to ask all of them just for time, but let's see what else we have here.
Have you ever heard the saying, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what you were saying in regards to they see where you are, but they don't know the years that it took you to get there. That's always one, even when I look at people that I, want to aspire to be, I have to remind myself they have 30 chapters over me. And as long as you just surround yourself with the people that you want to aspire to be like, and you keep asking them to pour into you, that's the number one thing that you should do, right? Surround yourself by the people that you want to emulate and ask them to teach you the things that they've learned. And that will help you fast track.
Well, Dana, this has been incredible. Did you have a question, Bill? Saw you raise your hand there.
I just wanted to make a quick comment to Dana. After you said, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. There was 16 of us at the main event that shared a house together, and we really got to know each other's previous chapters. And I know there's a lot of us on here that probably are in way different places than where we started, 5, 10, 20 years ago. Me personally, I would 20 years ago, I never would have approached my call. I never would have called him directly. Some guy off of YouTube that I just, I like that guy, and just randomly looked his office up and called him personally. I would have done that 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have stayed in a house with 15 strangers. So being in the right place, I think that's where we're at. But everybody that's on here, you can tell by the chats, sincere thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that story with us. A lot of people won't admit that they had cockroaches in their house. Been there, done that. It was 1976. I was 4. Yeah, just a huge thank you. I don't know, I want to speak for the whole group, but appreciate you giving us that insight. Just knowing that you weren't born rich, and then you struggle for those kids. My kids go to a private school as well. Opportunity that obviously you didn't have and I didn't have as well. So
Yeah.
Really super appreciate what you were able to tell us today.
Thanks, Bill.
Very well said, Bill. Dad, do you have anything you'd like to chime in with?
I'm glad you asked. I just wanted to say to Dana, having almost 70 years of failing forward,
Yeah.
a lot more probably failing than the other. And hearing your story, it's just amazing. And I hope that our team heard with their heart today what you said, because you weren't born with a silver spoon, and you didn't get it easy. And your chapter 20 certainly is preceded by 19 other chapters, and they weren't pretty in many cases. And so I'm looking for, personally, as I observe our team, I'm looking for the people that have real heart, enough heart to dig down and do what you're doing for themselves. Maybe not the exact same thing you're doing, but you know what I'm saying, to
Yeah.
make it, to push through, and to not make excuses, and to really do it. And I think we've got some winners here. We'll see. But thank you, Dana. Thank you for being
Thank you, Mike.
vulnerable and transparent.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else have a comment for Dana before we wrap up the call? I know we've kind of held her hostage here a little bit, but anyone just burning to say something or ask a last question?
I'll go.
Okay, we'll make you the last one, Carrie. Go ahead.
Okay, Miss Dana, I absolutely adore you. You're so inspiring. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for being on this call with us and sharing your story and your tips and your nuggets and everything. What would you say to someone that has like ADHD? How it's kind of hard sometimes to focus for hours on end. and get the job done, and, you know, and for consistency.
My initial thing that I thought of when you said that, and I really don't know a whole lot about ADHD, so I may be misspeaking here, but I think one of the things that I can relate to on that is needing like something else to do while I'm doing the boring thing. And so have you ever seen those jars where like people move like one paper clip to the next and like they do something after every call, or like they snap their wrist with a
Yes.
rubber band, you know, every time something happens? Like I would find some of those fidgety activities to do, maybe more than one,
Mhm.
that causes you to you know, stay busy. And I don't know if this is helpful or not, and it's probably because my brain is always going a million miles an hour all the time. So when I'm making dials, I'm not focused on pick up the phone, pick up the phone, pick up the phone. I'm doing other things while I'm dialing. And so it could be as simple as like playing a word game on my phone, where I'm still using my brain, but I'm doing something else besides focusing on the people that aren't picking up. So I would just say find something that you can do where you're still sitting that keeps your brain busy, but you can still stay and do the work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wow. Well, great last question there, Carrie. And let's wrap it up with that. We've held you hostage long enough. This has been incredible. I mean, if you'd be open to it at some point down the road, I'd love to have a part two and
Yes.
really dive into your sales process. They can get a lot of that on YouTube, but I'd really like to do that face to face as well. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable
For
and so
having me.
transparent. And you know, it's the people that have the most success put in the most work, and they're the fighters. And you didn't come with a silver spoon, and you fought. And regardless, I don't think you give yourself enough credit for your mindset and how you're wired to succeed. But I'm excited to continue developing this relationship with you and Empower. And I'm so happy to have you at Last Day Mark. I know you said you interviewed like 20 different companies before you even decided on here. I just want to see if you had any last words before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's just to go full circle to the very beginning, just always when it starts to feel hard, or when it starts to feel like you're suffocating, or you can't make one more call, or you're watching people post successes on social media, like just you have to do everything you can to remind yourself that everything you need is already here.
Mm.
Right? And that is why that focus and that principle is what kept me at Lincoln Heritage for 4 years, because it wasn't about what else can I get, right? What other shiny object is out there waiting for me? It was how do I maximize the opportunity where I'm at right now, and how do I be the very best at this place? And if that is where you keep your focus and you don't worry about the noise, don't worry about now it's easier said than done, because look, I don't even think imposter syndrome is the right word, but I was telling you, Mike, that I have comparison syndrome. I'm always looking at what people are posting and thinking, I want to be there. I want to do that. But it's not about let me go run to them. It is about what can I change with what I'm doing to get there. And I'm escaping his name right now. Simon Sinek.
Oh yeah.
Okay, he talks in one of his books about like the importance of competition, that like you want people to be out there that are doing more than you, that are doing better than you, because then you always have something to chase. And it's always driving that inner passion to continue to move forward. It would actually kind of be great for just a minute if you were like number one and nobody else was doing better than you, but then that's kind of like where you plateau and start to get lazy. And so it's actually a good thing when you see other people that are having success and doing better than you, because hopefully what that does is it allows you to look in the mirror and see what can I do to get those results? Not how can I go run to that shiny object and that's magically going to fix my problems. So that's what I
That'll
want to
stretch
find
your
on.
thinking, your vision. Yeah. Well, I think you've inspired some people today, Dana. I know you've encouraged some people. I mean, your story is pretty incredible. Thank you for giving us an hour and 20 minutes of your time. I pray that you and your team have a great Easter.
Thank
It's going to
you.
be fun to
you.
watch you grow, and we're going to be chasing you. So thank you very much. Appreciate it, and look forward to doing more of
Thank
these
you,
in the
everybody.
future.
Happy Easter to you guys. Have a great Friday. Go crush it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Team,
Dana.
we'll jump on our script role play. Let's jump on in 10 minutes at 1:30, and we'll still wrap up at the same time today. All right, take care, everybody.